Hello and welcome to another Atomic Geekdom author interview. We are very excited today because we have an author who is got a second book in a series coming out, and it is called Double Shadow. It is actually the second in the Splinter Effect series. We'll talk all about it with him, but we are very happy, yes, to welcome Andrew Ludington to the show. He's got his copy, which is good because my advanced copy is on my Kindle and it doesn't display as nicely on video. Hello, Andrew. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Good, good. Well, one thing that we always like to know when we have guests on Atomic Geekdom, we like to ask guests what their geek cred is. What things are you into? What makes you geeky? That kind of thing.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I grew up early and often playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, okay.
Very big D&D. I was always wanted to be the DM.
Hmm.
Sometimes I had to fight my friends for it, but always wanted to be the DM because this probably is no surprise. I would come up with elaborate stories to take people through. And I would typically not want to use any rule set because I wanted to, blur the genres a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, Dungeons and Dragons was a big one for me growing up. We also played Traveler, if you're familiar with that game system.
Mm-mm.
Um, I also was into comic books and all kinds of movies, and still am.
Yeah.
I was also a theater kid, so did a lot of acting, which to many people counts as geeky as
Yeah,
well.
I was a theater kid too. I
Absolutely.
did all the plays in my high school for all 4 years. There were several a year, and I did all of them. And I sometimes I think back and I'm like, man, I should do that now in my adult life too. That would be a lot of fun, but I
Yeah,
just don't have time. So,
Do
I know.
you keep some of that in your adult life? You still the dungeon master?
I don't have any to play with anymore. All of my
mm,
all of my friends are busy people, and it's hard to get them together on a regular basis. So I struggle to come up with a gaming group. I talked to some actors. My wife is an actress, and she was in a Shakespeare production last year, and turned out that several of the actors in the performance also love gaming. And
mhm.
I said, there seems to be a market these days for people live streaming or recording
Yeah.
their role-playing games. Would you all be interested in that? And yes, they really were very interested in it, but we have not gotten it together.
Yeah,
So,
I have friends that are all, adult D&D players, and their thing is like, boy, the Dungeon Master's curse as an adult is not being able to get any of the players together ever because we just don't have time. So
exactly.
another thing,
Wait,
Exactly.
I
yeah,
played for a while and it's the 13-hour campaigns each time we would meet. That's where it gets hard when you're an adult.
yeah,
Yeah. Can't keep it to a discrete 90 minutes.
Yeah.
yeah, it's difficult. But a game system I really liked. I played for a while. It's a more modern game called um Monster of the Week, and it's based on a game system called the Apocalypse system. And it's
Okay.
much more, it's very, very story driven, and a little bit less dice rolling. There's no D20s involved. You basically just play with two D6s, and
Hmm.
it works out pretty well. It's good for I did the game master, and I very good for telling stories with, and so that was a lot of fun. But
All right, I'll look into it.
yeah. So one of the things that we were curious about, because Splinter Effect and Double Shadow are both very historical novels, and what we learned is that you are not a teacher of history. We were like, oh, he's from, he works at Northwestern University. Do we think we played a little game. We were like, do we think he's in the history department? And it turns out, no, you're not in the history department. And so we were like, okay, well, is history something you've always enjoyed? And or did this come about as something more recent to you?
I have always enjoyed history. I've always been a big reader of history. I am not a historian by any means. The people who do that professionally are a whole different breed of cat. But I am definitely an enthusiast,
Mhm.
and I have had many people have offered their expertise along the course of writing these two books, which have been wonderful. So yeah, I've always been interested. I have a neighbor right up the block who is a serious historian,
Oh, wow.
uh, who wrote The Arc of Justice, which
Mhm.
is a was a extremely significant book. So yeah, I know real historians. I'm not a real historian. I am in fact a I work in technology at Northwestern.
Yes. Well, you fooled me quite a bit because um I'll go ahead. I like that they both take place in, well, yeah, we want to talk about Double Shadow a little bit, but I don't want to give too much away about that one, and because it's the sequel and it's the most recent one. But the first one takes place in, it's ancient Roman history. It's kind of a popular era of history. But then this new one, I'm like, 64 CE, like you were in Jerusalem, like that's kind of post the era people think a little bit about Jerusalem in, because obviously Bible time, very very big and everything. And so reading about that, I was like, this is so well researched. And that's why I was like, man, you could have fooled me that you weren't a real historian, because here I am learning a little bit about a period of history that isn't popular or in the zeitgeist, or however you want to phrase it. So that was really something that caught me reading Double Shadow. I was like, wow, this is cool.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, it's a really fascinating period of history.
Mhm.
It's early empire, not that long past the fall of the Republic,
Yeah.
or maybe better to say the slow dissolution of the Republic. Um, so it's a great period. It is what most people would associate with it, even if they don't know, is the Roman invasion of Judea, which ultimately resulted in the sack and destruction of Jerusalem, including when the temple was destroyed, and it has never been rebuilt. So, like that happens basically just after the close of this book.
Oh, wow.
I think too, so it does kind of revolve around in that timing and such. And what's interesting about it is how you write. Um, and I want to pick your brain on how you go about bringing in the modern to the past, because that's such a, I mean, they both marry so well together in these books. But even to the point when your rabbit being the main character, when he's getting ready to jump into the past, him going through every detail of like what his water bag looks like, the stitching on his clothes, and it starts to wrap you around where you can envision the dirt, and like in this one there's olive trees and such. You can feel the environment more. How do you research that, and how do you build that universe where you as the reader feels like you're stepping into the past with him?
Well, I thank you for the observation because that's exactly how I want the books to feel.
Mhm.
I really want a reader to feel like, oh, I'm a modern reader. I'm now traveling back to the past, and I get to experience that as albeit like the most dangerous tourism you'll ever experience, because Rabbit goes
Yeah.
through a lot of trials. Um, but I kind of want that fresh set of eyes looking at it so that you, along with Rabbit, are seeing it. He's often kind of superior in knowledge to the people he's around because he knows
Mhm.
their history. Um, but he is also, he's taking in these spots often for the first time right along with you as a modern person walking through the ancient world. Despite all the skills he has, he's still a 20th century person. So I think about, when I'm preparing him, I think to myself, all right, well, if I have the Smithsonian infrastructure at my disposal, what would they want to get right? And I kind of walk through so much I have to cut of that because it
Mm.
would be really boring to read. Um, but but I want to at least hint at all of the work that goes into making one of these missions successful.
Well, I think you're super successful in that because we felt it a bit in the first book in Splinter Effect and a lot more in this one about the difference between the different time travelers. You get somebody that is so pristine and knows everything like Rabbit, and then the other character in the book is a little more amateur. And you start to realize that their quote unquote cosplay isn't as up to professional standards as his. And there's an arrogance about that, which um in creating the characters, how do you take those details and make it part of their personality? Because in Rabbit's case, the devil is in the details. Like he knows every little bit about it, but all those little details also is what makes him kind of the individual person he is that doesn't let too many people in or does something with that maybe he shouldn't, but he's like, this is what needs to be done.
Right.
And he carries the regret with him too. Like he wishes he can do things differently and always being torn like a
Mhm.
catch-22. How do you, when you're planning the character development, how do you tie those two together?
So yeah, Rabbit is he is meticulous. He is careful. He's professional. He's been doing this for his whole career. He is arguably the first person in this little made up world of mine to ever have that job professionally.
Mhm.
And I have known people like this who will put the integrity of completeness like top of their list.
Yeah,
So when I was creating this other character, who we do meet in book one, so that's not really a giveaway.
true.
Um, she comes from a completely different background, and we don't learn about it until book two, but she doesn't even want to be part of this world. She has been dragged into this world, and she just happens to be good at it because she is super quick on her feet, extremely intelligent, and very nimble. But this is not her job. She doesn't want to be here. She ends up being strong-armed into continuing, and we
Yeah.
those of you who've read the two books know what that means in terms of continuing. So I love that. I love the contrast between the two of them, and I love the just a little bit of contempt each with which each one views the other one's
Yes.
means of operating. Um, and I will say, you see this in technology all the time. People who have that sort of move fast and break shit
Mhm.
Yeah.
uh, idea versus those who say, no, we need to have all of the boxes ticked and every requirement must be met. I see this in my real world a lot.
I'm sure. And speaking of technology, one of the things we were talking about before you joined us was I am a big fan of the fact that you didn't make your time travel something that is in the future. Your novels ostensibly start in our present, where, time travel has existed for quite some time in the year 2026, and they just go back in time. And I like that sci-fi look at the present and taking, because sci-fi, a lot of time travel is something like in the future or, very, very little. I mean, I guess the best example of time travel in the now would be Back to the Future, where Doc Brown invents this thing in the 80s at their present. But a lot of time travel is like Star Trek, where you're out and you happen to time travel into the past in Star Trek, or the time traveler from, Jules Verne and stuff. So I really appreciate that there's like a modern world and a modern bureaucracy, because also in your world you've set up that like technically time travel is supposed to be a government thing that governments handle. And then you've got in fact, a big portion of Double Shadow, not to give too much away about the book, concerns illegal time travel. So that I really enjoyed as well, where you now set up your idea of where people can get into trouble with this.
Um, yeah. So without tipping my hand too much, I will say that this is intended to be a four-book series.
Oh, okay.
And in each book, I want to introduce a new core concept about the kind of the time travel world,
Hmm.
and the both the concept and the plot elements involved with that concept will make you look back at the previous book differently.
Ooh, because yes, I've already started doing that. So, oh, I can't wait.
Well,
Because, oh, sorry, Jenny. I was
oh, I
just
was
gonna
going
say,
to say
because,
that's actually a great tie-in to my next
yeah.
question is that yeah, I was going to ask if there is a plot direction that spins off from the first one. So the first one is definitely kind of like an Indiana Jones scavenger hunt. You're trying to find, you're learning the politics of the time. This one, though, leans more on, not, I wouldn't say thriller, but it's a mystery. You're trying to figure out
Mhm.
these crimes that are happening in the past and how they're relating to the future. So they feel like almost two different genres, but they're in the same world. So I was curious if going forward, will like that genre fill kind of switch?
It will to some extent. I mean, it's there's a band, right? I have boundaries. It's
Mhm.
at no point is it going to become, erotica. Don't worry. But but within those, within those boundaries, yeah, it's going to shift around a little for a couple of reasons. But the principal one was I didn't want to write the same book four times in a row.
Mhm.
Um, or have it just be, more of the same. I knew I knew I had an overarching story that I wanted to tell. That I before I even wrote book one, I knew what that story was. So then it becomes, okay, well, what's the best way to introduce the parts of the story? So
Mhm.
I'm what I'm attempting to do is, and hopefully I'll do it well, is I'll introduce book two, which is in and of itself, I hope, a fun adventure story,
Yes.
a fun sort of burgeoning romance story, but that also makes you go back and reconsider book one. Book three will make you go back and consider books one and two, and book four will continue further.
Oh, you're hooking me right in already. I was already, well, I was gonna say at the end of Double Shadow, I was already hooked in for more books, but now I'm even now I'm even more like, oh boy, I can't wait because I love time travel stories. I'm always interested in how people handle the complexities of time travel. And that's one of the things that I found very interesting about the rules you set up. The title of the first book, Splinter Effect, comes from, one of the rules of time travel, which is in your world, you can't change the history of what you come from. Rabbit can go back in time and screw up lots of things and come back to where he is and have everything be exactly the same and some other timeline will branch off. One of the things I was curious about, and obviously I don't want you to spoil future stories, but I'm curious about there seems to be in the world of your book scientists not really sure what will happen if too many of these splinters start branching off of the main timelines. Do you know the answer to that question, or is it just something that is going to stay up? You do. Oh boy. Yes. Oh, that's very exciting because I found myself wondering that even in the first book, and then I got into the second one, and I'm like, just feel like there's something to this, especially since this isn't a Rabbit Ward novel. This is a Splinter Effect novel. So, oh,
And
good.
that it's funny, that isn't the thing I thought you were going to zero in on from book one. I thought you
Mm,
were going to zero in on something else, and I was going to have to really, pull my cards close to the vest.
sure.
But yes, yeah, it's and I part of that is, and you can like it or not like it in these books, but there are points at which the scientists who study time travel are like, yeah, we don't know, we don't have any way to model that, so we can't confirm it. We can speculate,
Yeah.
but we can't confirm. And I really wanted to bake that in because that's true in all kinds of science
Yes,
in the real world.
I was about to say it reminded me in a lot of real ways about the hypothesis of multiple universes, where it's like it's probably true, but we have no way to really, we can look at quantum particles and kind of make some hypotheses and assumptions based on what things do on a very, very tiny level. But at the end of the day, we really don't have a way to prove it. And because another, I like time travel stories, and I'm by no means do I really understand science, but I like to learn about science as much as I can, and kind of take my very basic knowledge and see where that takes me in stories about things like this. So. I did zero in on that portion because I was like, ooh, that's kind of like the many worlds hypothesis, and where could this possibly go in this story kind of thing. So that's another thing you did that really hooked me in personally.
Well, that good. That's fantastic because people sometimes will ask me about historical research, which I
Mhm.
love talking about. I've got a million great stories about it, but I also have done a lot of research on quantum physics.
Mhm.
And I've talked to some physicists and just, spitballed ideas to try to, with my structure in the books,
Yeah,
to say, okay, can you see any major, not is this real? Because
sure.
there's no way to confirm that, but at least to ask, okay, do you see anything about my structural model that would defy what we absolutely know to be true about quantum physics, or that we're pretty sure is true?
Mhm.
And so I kind of pressure tested all those theories before I started writing.
I
That's
think
really
that's
cool.
the success, though, especially from Splinter Effect into Double Shadow, is it feels obtainable and it also feels relatable. There is an instance where at the end of Splinter Effect, they have to do something that they don't know if it will work, and they're pushed to do it because of the situation at hand. And it's something, the scientists can't be involved with because they're not in the field at that moment going, how do we, it's life or death type situation. And that kind of gets revisited in the new book, in Dark Shadow. And you start playing with the timelines then of how what happens in Dark Shadow relates to what happens in Splinter Effect under the same guise, but different approaches because it's all what happens in the field, so to speak. Um, do we ever get to see any of the scientist characters behind it more so than like PJ and all of like the Smithsonians themselves? Because I would love to see a character that's just having an absolute meltdown because these rogue time travelers are just doing things they don't know what's going to happen with yet. And that's got to be nervous for someone knowing the science, knowing how you can splinter something and how it affects it.
Well,
So,
I will say that Rabbit is, although, they're not besties, he is personally acquainted with Robert Chang, who is the from the Krishnamurti Chang effect listed in the book, also known as the Splinter
Mhm.
Effect. Um, so he's actually friends with the leading physicists in the area. So
Mhm.
who knows? They might turn up.
Okay,
That might make
interesting.
their
being
opinions known.
it would be an interesting fly on the wall conversation between the two of them and how much anger comes from one than the other. Like, what are you thinking?
Another,
He is his own
yeah.
test subject.
Another thing I really liked, and this is something I always appreciate in if I'm reading a historical novel that takes place, in a time period I know very little about, is especially in Double Shadow, taking place so long, 64 CE, you think about as just such ancient, ancient times, and yet you're describing ancient Jerusalem in a way that made me go, for as much as things change, stuff stays the same. You talk about Rabbit buying food from just a street vendor, like he was walking down the street in New York City, and you're talking about beautiful apartments with, nice furniture and people hanging out, having a house party. And you're like, man, just it's humanity. And it makes me want to learn more because it's just like, man, like I said, as much as things change, things stay the same. And I never, I don't know what in my brain was a block there where I was like, oh yeah, you could just go buy food from a street vendor. And of course you could. It was a city in a country where, it's a city on Earth. Of course in 64 CE you could buy food from a street vendor, but I just never thought of it kind of thing.
Well, and it's what's so cool about that period of history is um, there are tons of primary sources. I mean, there are lots of letters that were preserved, and people, wrote letters to each other all the time, frequently about, you know, big decisions there in their lives and politics, etc. But sometimes just about casual, mundane things,
Mhm.
which really does kind of bring up uh, all kinds of the texture of life. But the other
That's
thing that strikes me about the Romans of that period, every time I think about it, is okay, so that was 64 CE. We're in 2026 CE.
Mhm.
The people that they venerated as being, oh, so historical were the Egyptians, where the first dynasty was like 3000 BC. So significantly further in their past than they are in our past.
Wow. Yeah. It's
It makes you
man, it's
cross-eyed when you
crazy.
start thinking about like from where you're at, the difference between the different, like you're closer to this than you are to this.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
It's crazy. But that is a compliment I have for your books too, is that your sub-characters. I really like Miriam in Double Shadow. She's
Yes.
not a huge role and she only pops in here and there, but every time she's in, it makes it where you're not just focused on the central characters. The world feels bigger and the consequences of everyone's actions will start to affect the one that's dyeing the clothes, the one that's helping the children, and it becomes this bigger world. And both books have that political shadow over it because of all the war and turmoils and
Mhm.
stuff of the time. Um, do you are those characters sprinkled in your pre-planning, or do they just sort of develop as you go through and you have the environment laid out in front of you?
I would say they were not in the pre-planning,
Mhm.
but when I start to outline up one of the books,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll have to figure out, okay, well, I know I want to get this lens onto the culture, and I also need, I have some plot requirements that need to be satisfied too. Um, how can I do that in the most interesting way? How can I create a character that's going to maybe shed a little bit more light on a part of that time period that you don't necessarily think about? So I loved writing Andor. I thought he was a wonderful character to write. He's so sweet.
Yeah.
Such a sweet kid. Um, but also has a weird upbringing and the fact that he's, almost certainly a product of the Mongol invasion, is hinted at, but not stated explicitly.
Mhm.
And then Miriam, I thought was great because it brings to light the fact that women had these much more prominent roles in society than most people realize it from that period. Women had jobs, women,
Yep.
you know, there were single women who did all kinds of things in that time period that I think people forget or just don't consider.
And
Yeah.
also just the her personality in general has that kind of liberal mindset, that
Hmm.
you don't expect in such a conservative time of the past, and
Mhm.
it shined a new light, which I really, really appreciated. It's
And
great.
all those little characters make the story that much more heartbreaking in some ways because as Rabbit tries to point out multiple times to himself and to other people, like these people's stories are already told. We can't do anything about it. And if we do, when we get home, it's not going to matter to our history anyway. But at the same time, like these characters, like you just you he wants to help them because like yeah, he wants to do something for them. Other people, you want them to be, so it makes the storytelling so poignant. And that's one of the things that I think was that you crafted with your, you can't change the past really, that works out in a way that is sad, but also, strong for just enjoying the characters that are there on the page.
Yeah, thank you. I I think about what Rabbit goes through in his job and think, oh, that would be brutal, right? To meet these people and think, oh, this is such a wonderful person. I'd love to see them succeed. And now
Mhm.
I'm going to have to leave them and not know how their life turns out and know
Yeah.
I can't change it and know that, they weren't the bit player in their life. They were the main player in their life. I was the bit player in
Yeah.
their life. And probably, they probably wouldn't even remember my tiny little excursion into their life, which
Hmm.
I think is really sad and beautiful and very human.
Yeah.
Well, and the
I
time travel adds that little extra element too. In this book, there's a moment where he's like, do I help them now or do I help them later? I can't do
Hmm.
both. But both have great positives and horrific negatives to wherever direction he goes. So there's no way he can, and you see it kind of as a trend through all the books, is that he has to make these decisions that he's never an all-out winner. He's going to lose something with every decision he made because time. If
Mhm.
he can't splinter things, but he also can he improve things? And if he improves things, will that splinter things? So it's just this time is this like vicious wheel for him, which makes his character so much stronger. And there are times when you're just like, what the hell, Rabbit? What are you doing? And then other times you're like, I got your back, man. I got this. So you kind of like, as you're reading both stories, you're going back and forth with them, and it makes you kind of empathize with them a bit because if you're feeling that, the character has to be going through that on a scale that's unlike what you're feeling, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, and I really try to make ultimately a very moral guy who wants to do the right thing,
Mhm.
and the right thing is not obvious in most of his decisions.
Well, and I love his job though, because as just myself, I think about all the time, everybody has the hypothetical conversation. If you could go back in time and stop Hitler and all this stuff. One of the things I in my life would like to do most is just go back and watch history and see
Hmm.
how things happen. Like, and go, okay, how did X really happen in, because how what could we learn just by going back and essentially doing what Rabbit does, just watching history. And I think that is a fascinating. I think about it pretty frequently. My day job, I'm a mail carrier, so I spend a lot of time just thinking things. And so
Hmm.
I think a lot about what would I want to go see back in time if I could just go back and watch history happen. And could I solve mysteries that people are wondering about if I could just go back and just watch, not even try to change anything, not get involved, just watch.
Well, isn't that the saying too? It's like history is known by like what is I can't I'm gonna
History is
screw
written
up.
by the victors.
Yeah,
Yep.
right. So what if the truth was actually something different? It's an interesting concept of just being the eyes, but it goes back to Rabbit of like, would you want to change things if you're seeing a horrific
Hmm.
past? But I guess that's what makes history the best teacher, right? Don't
Yeah.
repeat the
And
mistakes that you've had.
the you heard of the concept of radical gratitude?
No.
I would say
It rings a bell and I can't bring the definition to mind.
Rabbit really struggles with radical gratitude, which is it's being grateful for things that aren't pleasant.
Mm.
It's like,
Mhm.
you fell down and broke your leg. I'm going to be grateful for breaking my leg, except that, turns out this is too obvious of an example, but you meet the love of your life, who's the nurse who takes care of you and,
Mm.
in the
Mhm.
hospital. And if you hadn't broken your leg, you wouldn't have you wouldn't have met the nurse. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of radical gratitude. And it becomes radical when you can't see clearly what the good outcome was,
Mm.
but to just acknowledge, like, yeah, I have to be grateful for even the lousy things that happened to me because they
Something
also
good.
allow the other things in my life to unfold.
Yeah.
And Rabbit really struggles with that, um, which we saw evidence of in book one. That's a real problem for him, and that will come back to haunt him.
Okay.
Well, this book too, so Double Shadow, definitely more so in my opinion than Splinter Effects, has a true villain. Like, and the villain
Hmm.
is strong, and it's great how the pages kind of you learn a little bit more. I was telling Matt before we logged on, as the book got closer to the end, I was figuring out the mystery, figuring out, and then once you know, and then you're figuring out what the next step is now that you know. The ending of this book, without spoilers, I thought was so like almost poetic justice in a sense because I thought, much like Rabbit did, knew how it was going to end, and then it didn't. And it opens up a lot going into the next book where you're like, well, shit, here we go. Um, but the how do you decide when you're going to take the story and give the reader, here's the answer to the mystery, and then turn it on its head?
I hesitate to say every time, but every time, I, I have a hard time. I have a hard time with clean endings. I promise. In the end of the four books, it will be a clean ending.
Hmm.
Um, but each of these books is setting up the rest of the story, and so
Right.
there are dominoes that need to fall. Um, I I also just I loved the ending for the villain.
Hmm.
Um, and so I don't want to give any spoilers.
Yeah.
Um, but I knew that's how I wanted his character arc to end. Like that was the first thing I knew about the book, basically, other than the fact that they were looking for the Copper Scroll treasures. Um, I knew that, okay, that's how I want that character's arc to end in this book.
Oh,
So,
wow. That's
and then it
It,
was
interesting.
just, what can I introduce along the way to that ending that will make that ending surprising?
what's great too is like we're dancing around the spoilers, but I think anybody who watches this that has read it, all of this will play out and they'll know what we're talking about. But it's
Hmm.
not telling anybody. Like if I heard all of this and I hadn't, it's not going to ruin anything to it. So I'm going to say this in context of that. Um, what's great about that villain's character is there is a turning point in his past. That the question is how does that splinter? And because it's not what was planned. And that's what's fascinating just because of the dynamics of that character itself. Um, with your future books, are you staying on this rabbit's splinter, or are you going to branch out to something that might not be parallel?
Hard for me to say that without giving too
Damn
All right.
much.
All right.
it. I was
Fair.
Um,
hoping for
Fair.
a little Easter egg.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll pivot then, and I'll just say I just wanted to bring this up because I'm a horror reader and a horror fan. I like, all kinds of bloody, gutty, uncomfortable things, and you still managed to write one of the most uncomfortable things I have ever read. And this is not giving away plot details or anything, but it's when Rabbit has to escape through the little tunnel of where
Oh.
the blood runs out of. And reaches the point where the pipe gets too narrow. And I'm not even a claustrophobic person, but normally. But the way you write him going through this pipe that gets to a point so narrow that he doesn't think he can go forward and can't go backwards, and the only way to get out is by the pressure of blood building up behind him. I just,
We need
I
a list of
was
how many phobias
I
that
was
one
like,
chapter
just,
actually checked off a
I
list.
was so uncomfortable, and I just wanted to say that that was just a great piece of work to make me uncomfortable with all the stuff that I've read and watched in my lifetime. To just go, everything about this is horrible.
Yeah. It's a
Oh,
Great
when I
answer.
was I I wrote myself into a corner in
oh,
that
okay.
scene. And I'm like,
Literally and figuratively.
how am I gonna get him out of here?
Hmm.
And it turns out that blood tunnel's a real thing.
Oh, wow.
So nobody knows how exactly how big it was, right? So
Sure.
I just made it the worst size possible. Um, but yeah, as I was writing him getting out, I thought, oh, this would be like the
Oh,
most terrifying way to die I can possibly
yeah.
think of.
Well, what's
Everything
great too
about
is
it was.
there's that juxtaposition too of when he comes out and the first people that see him. I seriously laughed out loud. I was just like, because you can vision it and you're just like, yeah, I probably have the same response. I'm getting the hell out of Dodge.
But also at the same time, right at the end of that, we go back to me learning something. There's a bunch of farmers at the other side buying blood to fertilize crops with. And I was like, wow. I came from this situation of everything about this is horrible to like now I'm learning something. So yeah.
I mean, in book one, I gave you the people sold pee. In book
Yep.
two, people are selling blood.
Yep. It
The things you
was
learn about history.
The great markets of the world and history.
Hmm.
just absolutely fascinating.
So, as you can tell, we're both big fans, and we're even more excited now that to know that there's two more books in line. Um, with the success of these, do you have other stories you're going to tell that you have planned or in your brain that's ready to hit a page?
Why, yes, I do. I
Yeah.
um yeah, so while these have been consuming a lot of my attention,
Mhm.
they haven't been consuming all of my attention. So I also wrote and I'm pitching it now, a straight up sci-fi novel,
Oh.
um, which is mostly complete, and we're going to be taking to publishers to see if they're interested very soon. So that is I can give you a little bit of a hook. So
Yes, please.
that's the first interstellar colony leaves a future Earth, which is so decayed at that point that it's clear it's not going to be able to sustain humanity.
Mhm.
They arrive at a habitable planet, which seems picture perfect for the rebirth of mankind. Only they learn that more modern humans and faster ships have beaten them there and are strip mining the planet to make a war machine.
Wow. All
So,
right.
Like, let me tell you what we've learned from our recent planet.
yeah, exactly. So that's
Love
I'm
it.
working on that right now. I've got more of a uh, more of a closed door mystery that I'm working on right now, but that also has an unusual hook that I can't think of a
Okay.
good way to give away
That's all
without
right.
saying.
That's all right. You've got me with closed door mystery. I like
Okay.
that kind of stuff. So, all
And then
right.
I'm
And
also
I
this
trust
week.
you now because the mystery in Dark Shadows played out greatly. I like to try to figure out what's going on. And if I could be a little surprised at the end, I'm like, it's a damn good
Mhm.
mystery. So I
All
trust you.
right.
I trust
I
you in
like
And
this new adventure.
I like
and
to hear
I'm
that.
a mark. I'm along for the ride in any mystery. I tend to not try to figure things out. So I'm also of the opinion Jenny's like if she's surprised it's a good mystery, and I'm like, if I'm not surprised, it's not a good mystery because if I so I guess if I am surprised, it's also a good mystery because I'm not trying to figure out who it is. I'm just along for the ride. I know some mystery readers like to play the game, and that's cool. I just like to be surprised, and that's also cool. So if I'm surprised, it's also a good mystery because I didn't figure it out. Because if I can figure it out without trying, then there's a problem.
That's fair.
Yep. So.
The last thing I'm doing right now is this week. I'm going to start releasing a serial novella on my website for free.
Oh, cool.
So the first chapter is going to get posted this week, and then any list subscribers will get the subsequent chapters.
Very cool.
Awesome. Well,
Making sure.
I don't have anything else for this evening, Jenny. Do you?
No, I love though the pitches
Okay.
because this
I
gives
do
us more
too.
to dive into. When finished Splinter Effect last year, and it has a well shit, now I need to know what happens next. And then the moment we found out that Double Shadow was coming. But now with the ending of this one and knowing that
Mhm.
there's two more, super excited.
Yep.
Um, where can listeners find you? Are you on the socials or what is your website? And we can tag it into our coverage as well.
Yeah, thank you. Website is straightforward. It's andrewludington.com.
Mhm.
And I'm on Instagram and Facebook.
Mhm.
Um, I I let go of my X subscription.
Yeah, a lot of, yeah. Yep.
Ditto. And
Fair. Very fair.
we can find your handles on your website.
Yes. Yep.
All right.
Perfect. Perfect. We'll add those to our show notes as well.
And
All
again, the
right.
book is Double Shadow. And Jenny, I'm not sure if we're releasing this pre or post book release, so I'll just say, go look it up. Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Libro.com, bookshop.org. It's all the
Support your
places.
local shops if you
Yep.
can.
Support your local bookstore. If you can't support your local bookstore, bookshop.org will support a local bookstore. So,
Yeah.
Well, that's the
And it
amazing thing about local bookstores. You can just go in and tell them, I'd like this book, and they'll get it for you.
yep, exactly.
and the
Library,
more you
wherever you
do that,
can.
the more that they'll know your style, which is also great. They're like,
Yep.
look what I got you. You want this, right? And I'm like, yes, please, yes, please. Well,
Very
this has
cool.
been this has been spectacular. Thank you so much for sharing the time with
Yes,
us, and we will release this and get you some tags on there and share any new things you have. We really appreciate you coming on to the show today.
very much.
Thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.